Imagine living in a country where you were afraid to speak your mind, afraid to be different. Imagine living in a country where one man can take you out of a job and into jail if he wanted. In the early 1950s, our own United States of America faced these exact circumstances. There were terrifying accusations of traitorous conduct being wielded by one man, and no one could find the courage to stand up to the threatening charges. And so, a tyranny of ideology turned a national fear into cultural and political hysteria, driven by our own Wisconsin Senator, Joseph McCarthy. In a country of mass fear and injustice, Edward R. Murrow stood up through his news program, See It Now, and set in motion the chain reaction that eventually brought McCarthy's reign of terror to an end. A decade before the anti-communist campaigns in the Senate, the United States and the Communist Soviet Union were allies in World War II, united in their common military goal of forming a solid front against fascism. After the war, Communist Russia and the United States became devout enemies because of the Soviet goal of converting Eastern European countries to the Communist bloc. Western powers were worried that this could potentially destroy democracy. The resulting conflict was a period known as the Cold War, marked by hostility, fear, and a massive arms buildup with the potential of worldwide destruction. Joseph Raymond McCarthy, a Republican from Outagamie County, Wisconsin, was elected as the state's junior senator in 1946. Due to his dishonest actions during his first term, McCarthy needed a surefire re-election strategy to retain his seat. He and his campaign advisors decided to exploit the American fear of communist subversives in the United States and portray McCarthy as the country's savior. On February 9, 1950, McCarthy made a speech in Salt Lake City claiming that he had a list of people in the State Department known to be members of the American Communist Party, stating, "In my opinion, the State Department, which is one of the most important government departments, is thoroughly infested with communists."
Even if there are only one communist in the State Department, that would still be one communist too many.
He wanted to instill fear in people and gain power by instilling fear. And so I remember with some distinction his waving a list. I have a list of so many hundred and some odd people in the State Department or in this department who are card-carrying members of the Communist Party. And most of it was simply unsubstantiated and untrue.
Interestingly enough, the list of names he presented was not a top-secret document and had already been published by the Secretary of State 4 years earlier. Actually, the document McCarthy described related not only to loyalty, but to alcoholism, incompetence, and sexual deviancy. In fact, if McCarthy had been screened, his own drinking problems and sexual preferences would have put him on the list. 2 weeks after his announcement in Utah, McCarthy made a 6-hour speech on the Senate floor criticizing the Democratic administration by suggesting that communist subversives had infiltrated it. When challenged by Democrats in the Senate, McCarthy accused them of being part of the same communist conspiracy. This allegation caused many of these senators to lose their re-elections in 1950, forcing many politicians to think twice before crossing the Wisconsin senator. On a crazed pursuit for communists comparable to the Salem witch hunts, he even accused President Dwight D. Eisenhower of being associated with the Socialist Party. Because the public knew that if they spoke up against McCarthy, it was likely they too would be blacklisted, most were terrified and silent. However, on March 9, 1954, Edward R. Murrow was one of the first to raise his voice. Edward R. Murrow is one of the most celebrated and respected radio and television journalists in history. He began his career in 1935 at only 27 years of age, when CBS sent him overseas to broadcast the action at the beginning of World War II. Later, during the Korean War, Murrow reported the events on location. The radio program in which he was featured, called I Can Hear It Now, was so popular in America that Murrow and his partner Fred Friendly transformed their project into a televised series labeled See It Now, home to Murrow's most significant and defining moments. In 1953, Murrow made the brave decision to investigate and feature the case of Milo Radulovich on See It Now.
Good evening. A few weeks ago, there occurred a few obscure notices in the newspapers about a lieutenant, Milo Radulovich, a lieutenant in the Air Force Reserve, and also something about Air Force Regulation 35-62. That is a regulation which states that a man may be regarded as a security risk if he has close and continuing association with communists or people believed to have communist sympathies.
The actual charge against me is that I have maintained a close and continuing relationship with my dad and my sister over the years.
Driven by his unwavering belief in accuracy and fairness in journalism, Murrow made the decision to run a 30-minute segment exposing McCarthy's outrageous lies and misstatements. The controversial stance he was about to take, however, put himself as well as his colleagues and the entire CBS network in danger of becoming blacklisted or possibly thrown in prison. In fact, the network was so anxious about the program that CBS and See It Now sponsor refused to publicize the proposed McCarthy show.
He has traveled far, interviewed many, terrorized some, accused civilian and military leaders of the past administration of a great conspiracy to turn over the country to communism. The line between investigating and persecuting is a very fine one, and the junior senator from Wisconsin has stepped over it repeatedly. Earlier, the senator asked, "Upon what meat does this our Caesar feed?" Had he looked 3 lines earlier in Shakespeare's Caesar, he would have found this line, which is not altogether inappropriate. "The fault, dear Brutus, is not in our stars, but in ourselves." The actions of the junior senator from Wisconsin have caused alarm and dismay amongst our allies abroad and given considerable comfort to our enemies. And whose fault is that? Not really his. He didn't create this situation of fear, he merely exploited it, and rather successfully.
After Murrow's stand against McCarthy on See It Now, McCarthy's credibility with Americans began to diminish. Pressured to produce at least one communist with real evidence, he unsuccessfully challenged one of the most powerful giants in America, the United States Army. After the blow struck by Murrow's See It Now program, the nationally televised Army McCarthy hearings gave the public a second close look at Joseph McCarthy's unforgiving actions. McCarthy claimed with no evidence that many top Army officials were communists or communist sympathizers. During one of these televised hearings, Army Representative Joseph Welch was defending his associate from communist accusations. When McCarthy continually pressed Welch about his client, Welch took his own stand against McCarthy and asked him on national television,
"Have you no sense of decency, sir? At long last, have you left no sense of decency?"
At this point, the entire American public viewed McCarthy with disdain, and the Senate stripped him of his power. While Murrow's stand was not the straw that broke McCarthy's back, his brave example of standing up for his beliefs showed many Americans how to do the same. McCarthy's success revolved around invading privacy, forming inaccurate claims, and going to extreme, unnecessary measures to protect America. While controversy in the new millennium doesn't nearly compare to the hysteria of the 1950s, many people believe that the United States government is once again unfairly accusing citizens of crimes with little or no evidence. In May 2004, Brandon Mayfield, an Islamic convert, was arrested after being accused of involvement with the train bombings in Madrid.
Federal agents showed up at his office and told him that he was wanted on a material witness warrant. The second factor that concerned me was the FBI's use of the media to, in my opinion, generate fear and hysteria by stating that they had an absolutely incontrovertible match, and that's in quotes, Mr. Mayfield's finger to the fingerprint on the bag, and that proved to be false. Brandon Mayfield was not a terrorist, but he was a Muslim. He is a Muslim. And that factor, I think, is what led the FBI to leap to the wrong conclusion that he had been involved in the Spain train bombing.
By replacing the word communist with terrorist, some of our own top government officials are becoming more and more like the senator that broke down an entire nation. Thomas Jefferson, one of the founders of our nation, said that dissent is the highest form of patriotism. If our new McCarthy is on the rise, who will be our next Edward R. Murrow? Murrow was just a journalist. Everyone has the opportunity to take a stand against the unjust ideas in our country.
The really important thing is for Americans to recognize that their heritage is to stand up, speak out, and not be intimidated.
It's still a free country. Let your voices be heard. Stand up, do what you can. Unless you stand up when it's important, you won't have the right to stand up at all.
This is no time for men who oppose Senator McCarthy's methods to keep silent. We can deny our heritage and our history, but we cannot escape responsibility for the result. And remember that we are not descended from fearful men. Not from men who feared to write, to speak, to associate, and to defend causes that were for the moment unpopular. Cassius was right. The fault, dear Brutus, is not in our stars, but in ourselves. Good night, and good luck.